Hi, I'm Taryn. I spent 2 years paying my parents' mortgage, every month in silence, while they praised my sister for a job she didn't even have. They believed every photo she posted, every fake promotion, every smile at the dinner table. But what broke me wasn't the lie. It was the brunch toast, the thank you meant for her, the erased credit, the silence they handed me like leftovers. I stopped paying, and I watched the house fall. But what happens when the one they ignored is the only reason the roof stayed over their heads? It was one of those spring evenings in Des Moines, where everything felt deceptively calm, the kind where the wind carries just enough warmth to make you forget winter's still hiding behind tomorrow's forecast. I just finished sanding down a custom maple cabinet in the workshop behind the house. The sawdust still clung to my jeans, and my hands smelled faintly of polyurethane and cedar. It should have been a satisfying day, but something in the air, or maybe just in me, felt off. Dinner was already set when I walked in. The dining table was dressed up, cloth napkins, real plates, even candles. That only happened when we had guests or when Callista was home. She was already seated, laughing at something Gideon, our father, had said. Vera stood behind her, fussing with the wine glasses like we were expecting royalty. I took my usual spot near the end of the table. As I slid into the chair, Vera raised her glass and gently tapped the side. "To Callista," she began, her voice theatrical in that way she always used when she wanted attention. "For everything she's done this past year, keeping the family home intact, we truly wouldn't still be here without her." The room echoed with clinks and murmurs of agreement. Callista smiled like it was her birthright to be honored. I, on the other hand, sat there staring at my glass, my fork paused mid-lift. I didn't say anything, because how do you tell a table full of people, your own family, that it wasn't Callista who'd kept this house out of foreclosure? That it had been you, wiring money month after month in silence, while they praised someone who hadn't lifted a financial finger? They didn't know. Of course they didn't know. I'd made sure of it. That toast, those words, they shouldn't have surprised me. But they did. And surprise, when mixed with betrayal, tastes like metal on your tongue. Later that night, when the plates were cleared and everyone had settled into the living room, I slipped upstairs to check my email. Vera had sent me a link. Subject line: "Thought this might help." It was a job listing for a night receptionist position at a budget motel just off the highway. Minimum wage, overnight shifts, zero benefits. The caption underneath read, "Something stable for you." I laughed. Not the kind that makes you feel lighter, the kind that empties something out of you. The woman who's been running her own design and carpentry business for over 5 years, taking on remodels, sourcing her own clients, building custom furniture from scratch, is being gently nudged toward working behind a front desk in the graveyard shift. Stability, I muttered aloud. Funny how the one holding the walls together is seen as the unstable one. 2 years ago, I overheard them whispering in the kitchen, their voices low, filled with panic. Dad's hours at work had been cut. Bills were stacking up. They were behind on the mortgage. There was talk, desperate, fearful talk, about selling. They didn't ask me for help, not directly. They wouldn't have. They didn't believe I had it in me to help. But I did. I always did. That night, I went back to my truck, pulled up my business account, and set up auto payments under a generic label, Home Equity Support Fund. It was anonymous enough that they'd think it came from a program or a grant. I watched each month as $1,250 disappeared from my earnings without so much as a nod from anyone. Not that I wanted a parade, but a nod would have been nice. Instead, Callista walked through the front door once every other weekend with a new handbag and some story about quarterly bonuses or client dinners. She'd lean over and kiss Vera's cheek and talk about investments like she'd actually made one. I watched, quietly, like always. At that dinner table, while they toasted her, my thoughts ran wild. I remembered late nights in my workshop, building shelving units to cover last month's property tax. The way I counted tips from my last design consult just to cover a bump in the electric bill that Vera swore was unavoidable. I never questioned it. I just handled it. And they thought Callista was the glue. Don't speak. Not here. Not tonight, I whispered to myself, more command than comfort. Callista carried the conversation for the rest of the evening, her voice silky with confidence, her smile just wide enough to distract everyone from asking anything real. No one looked at me. Not once. When I walked out to the porch to clear my head, I noticed Vera inside, polishing the frame around the new family photo that hung in the hallway. I wasn't in it. They'd taken it last month, on a Sunday I'd spent finishing a kitchen remodel for a neighbor. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I leaned against the railing, pulled out my phone, and opened my banking app. The payment for this month had cleared 2 days ago, just like it always did. I stared at the number, then I closed the app. What happens when the only thing holding it all together lets go? The morning after, the toast still clung to my skin like varnish that wouldn't dry. The house smelled of leftover roast and fabric softener, the way it always did the day after Vera wanted everything to seem polished. I walked into the living room to grab my tool belt from the side closet when I saw it. Newly printed, perfectly framed, hung right above the fireplace mantel. A family photo. My family. Except, I wasn't in it. Callista stood centered, flanked by Vera and Gideon, arms linked, dressed in those carefully chosen earth tones that screamed togetherness to anyone who didn't know better. The caption written in cursive gold across the bottom read, "Family, where our roots begin and our love never ends." It was taken the night before, apparently during dessert. I must have been in the kitchen clearing dishes, or maybe out in the garage checking messages. I couldn't remember, but I sure as hell wasn't in that frame. And somehow, that felt intentional. Vera noticed me staring. "Isn't it perfect?" she said, stepping beside me, brushing a non-existent speck off the frame. "Callista had it printed this morning. Just a little memory of how far we've come." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. A dozen things raced through my head. Things I could have said. Should have said. Like, I designed the trim on that fireplace you're hanging that lie on. Like, I reinforced that beam behind this wall after you ignored the water damage for months. Like, your memory of how far we've come seems to skip over the person who's been footing the path. But I said none of that. Instead, I nodded, turned on my heel, and walked out. It wasn't even 10 a.m., and the ache had already set in. I found myself back in the garage, my sanctuary. Tools laid out in comforting symmetry, the scent of pine and lacquer grounding me. I ran my fingers along the edge of a table I was restoring for a client. Something about sanding away damage always calmed me. I remembered rebuilding that fireplace 2 winters ago, when the base had rotted out, when no contractor in town wanted to take it because the job was too small. I had done it on a weekend, quietly, efficiently, alone. No photo was taken that day, no frame to hang. "A man is not where he lives, but what he builds," I whispered, repeating the Faulkner quote I'd scrawled into my first notebook as an apprentice. That room, that photo, that was my workshop, my work. And somehow, I had still been cropped out of my own craft. Later that afternoon, scrolling through my phone while waiting for a client call, something popped up on my feed. Callista's post. Caption: "Finally got my dream car. Manifestation works if you work too." Photo: her, standing next to a glossy Audi, keys in hand, sunglasses perched just so. I blinked. No. No way. It was that Audi, the one I'd co-signed for last October. She was one missed payment away from default and claimed she just needed help for a few months. I never told Vera or Gideon. Callista had begged me to keep it quiet. "They don't need to know I can't swing it alone," she'd said. "It'll just be temporary." The loan, still active. The insurance, under my name. The gratitude, apparently dead. By evening, I was back at the dinner table, appetite hollowed out. Gideon passed the butter and glanced at Callista. Independent girls run this world, huh? Callista laughed. The kind of laugh that glides like silk but cuts like glass. Vera raised her wine glass. Maybe one day your sister will teach you how to manage your money like her. My hand tightened around my fork. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. I just swallowed hard and excused myself, dropping my napkin beside my plate. The air in my room felt thicker that night. I couldn't sleep. So I wandered into the kitchen for water. The fridge hummed softly, the only sound in the house. I opened the door, and there it was. A sticky note pressed onto the side of the milk carton. Don't forget. Family photocopies going to neighbors. I stood there, door ajar, light spilling across my feet, staring at that stupid note like it had slapped me. They weren't just forgetting me. They were distributing it. They were handing out proof that I didn't exist in this house, not just metaphorically, tangibly. I closed the fridge, slower than necessary, and leaned against the counter, my knuckles white against the cold glass in my hand. What kind of people erase someone while still living under the same roof? I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal or how little effort it seemed to take. The sun wasn't even all the way up when I stepped into the kitchen, still barefoot, still trying to shake off the dull ache from yesterday. Vera stood by the sink, talking with Mrs. Lambert, the neighbor from across the street. They were sipping coffee like they did most mornings. Comfortable, relaxed. Part of a ritual I'd never been invited into. She's been such a blessing to us, Mrs. Lambert was saying. Callista really turned things around for you two. Vera chuckled, voice light. Yes, she's doing so well, always finding ways to help out. We're lucky to have her. I froze behind the wall, mug in hand. The heat from the ceramic bit into my skin, but I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My name wasn't mentioned, not once, not even as a footnote. My ears rang with the silence that followed. It was louder than their words. Later that day, I found myself back in the kitchen, alone this time, wiping down the countertop I'd replaced with my own hands last month. Vera had complained about the old one being too dated, too scratched up for when guests come over. So I'd installed a new quartz slab, sealed the grout, even custom cut the backsplash. She'd offered nothing more than a passing, "Glad that's done." I hadn't billed her. I didn't even think to. Gideon used to say, "People don't clap for silent builders, Taryn, but the house stands because of them." That line used to make me feel noble. Lately, it just made me feel invisible. Later that night, I collapsed on the couch in the workshop, scrolling through my phone, trying to feel like the world outside my family still existed. That's when I saw it. Callista, posed in the exact kitchen I'd just renovated. Hair done, makeup soft and glowing, coffee mug perfectly angled. The lighting was warm, the staging, magazine perfect. Caption: just another cozy evening in our space. And designed by love, grateful. My thumb hovered over the screen. I blinked. I blinked again. It was my work. Every tile. Every cabinet pull. That backsplash? I'd spent 18 hours on it, sweating in the August heat because the AC had gone out. And she hadn't even tagged me. No credit. No mention. Just her, smiling in a home she hadn't lifted a finger to maintain, presenting it like it was hers in every way that counted. I muttered aloud, "You didn't build that. You just posed in front of it." At dinner, the performance continued. Gideon was smiling more than usual, nodding at Callista with the kind of pride I used to ache for. "You've really got a great eye, Cal," he said. "That kitchen looks like something out of a catalog." Callista shrugged modestly. "We girls just know what looks good, huh?" Vera laughed, placing a hand on Callista's shoulder. "She gets it from me." I said nothing. I sipped my water and stared down at my plate until the conversation shifted, until the walls stopped pressing in on me. The next day, a letter came in the mail. Handwritten, delicate cursive. A return client who had loved the built-in bookshelves I'd done for her last fall. "Thank you, Taryn," the note read. "You brought so much care into the details. Everyone who visits comments on the craftsmanship. I'm still blown away. You've got a gift." Vera opened it first, of course. She read it aloud at the kitchen counter, smirking as if it were amusing. "They must really like you," she said, before tossing the letter down. "You must have had help with something like that. It looks very polished." She didn't mean it as a compliment. Not really. I stood there, staring at the letter, like it had betrayed me, like my own hard work was a stranger in this house. "I didn't need help," I said quietly, mostly to myself. "I needed credit." That night, I powered up my laptop and opened a new folder. I titled it Truth. I began saving things: screenshots of invoices, email confirmations, time-stamped photos, social posts, notes from clients. Every time someone in this house had taken my work and repackaged it as part of their narrative, I added another file. The truth doesn't scream. It doesn't need to. It just waits, patient and precise, until there's no room left for pretending. As I sat in the dim light of the workshop, eyes stinging from the glow of the screen, I hovered my mouse over one old invoice, the first one I'd ever sent to my parents' mortgage company. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. But I did wonder, how long could I keep watching them build stories on my silence? Saturday started like most others around here. Quiet, ordinary, deceptively smooth. The kind of morning that pretends nothing's fractured underneath. I was on my knees in the kitchen, tightening the faucet under the sink. A slow drip had turned into a steady stream last night, and I couldn't sleep knowing the sound of waste was echoing through the house. Above me, I heard heels tapping across the floor. Then the door opened. "Oh, you got it!" Callista's voice chirped from behind. I didn't turn, just focused on the wrench in my hand. The refrigerator door opened. Paper bags rustled. Vera's voice floated in next. "She just got another bonus, 6 months early. Her manager says she's top tier in the region." "Really?" I said, pushing myself up slowly. Callista turned, surprised to see I was within earshot. Vera smiled. "Oh, we didn't mean to interrupt your project. I was just saying how proud we are of your sister." My hands smelled like rust and soap. My shirt was damp from the pipe. And yet they were talking like I wasn't even there, like I hadn't just spent the last 2 hours preventing their cabinets from flooding. If silence built this house, I thought, then lies are what they're using to decorate it. After lunch, I returned to the kitchen for a bottle of water and noticed a binder sitting on the counter. It was my design binder, the one I used for client presentations. I flipped it open. Inside were layout sketches, printed renderings, material samples, and a contract in draft for the mayor's kitchen remodel, a project I had spent months preparing. "Why is this here?" I asked, trying to stay even. Vera looked up from her seat at the island. "Callista's bringing a client over next week. She needed something to show. Those are her latest ideas." I blinked. "Those are mine." Callista appeared from behind me. "Relax. I'm not taking your job. It's just for presentation." "You're using my work to bluff your way through another lie," I said, voice low but sharp. Vera stood. "You always want credit for everything, don't you?" For a second, the room went still. Callista crossed her arms, leaning casually against the counter. "I've always said you've got a flair, Taryn," she added. "I just know how to make it marketable." Dinner that evening was a circus of subtle digs and polished performances. Gideon carved the roast, smiling like everything was fine. "You girls should work together," he said. "Build something real, like real sisters." Callista smiled, poured herself another glass of wine. "Yeah," she said, tilting the glass toward me. "Maybe we could do a joint brand. You build it, and I'll sell it." The table chuckled. I didn't. I gripped my fork so tight I thought it might bend. My appetite had long since left the room, but I stayed seated, back straight, face still. Inside, a wall cracked. The next morning, I found Vera humming in the kitchen. A gift bag sat on the counter. Her birthday had slipped by again, something she hadn't let anyone forget. "Someone knows me well," she said, pulling out a high-end spa voucher. Exactly what I needed. She looked at Callista. You always know what I like, baby. Callista, eyes bright, smiled. You deserve it, Mom. I watched them, waiting. The card was unsigned. Of course it was, because I'd been the one to buy it, quietly, 2 weeks ago, paid in full from a bonus check I hadn't told anyone about. I stared at my coffee, swirling the spoon slowly. That spa day had been my one attempt to bridge something between us, and she gave it away without hesitation. That night, I didn't knock out of habit. I knocked because something had shifted. Vera opened her door, surprised to see me. Everything okay? I stayed in the doorway, calm, clear. If this keeps happening, I said, I'm done helping anyone. She blinked, trying to decipher what I meant. Don't be dramatic, it's family. No, I said. It's not drama when a line is being crossed. And even in families, there are boundaries. She stared at me, unsure what to say next. But it didn't matter. I turned and walked away. In the workshop, later that night, I sat down at my desk. I opened the shared folders Callista had access to. Client plans, drafts, mock-ups. One by one, I deleted them. Then I opened my journal. On the first blank page, I wrote, This is where I stop patching holes they keep punching in the walls. Monday mornings always brought their own quiet weight, but that particular one felt heavier than usual. I was seated at the kitchen table with my usual black coffee, letting the steam blur the newspaper headlines, pretending to read. Gideon shuffled past me in his slippers, muttering about property taxes and utility bills like he always did when he thought no one was paying attention. He stood near the window, scratching his chin absently. It's a blessing Callista's doing so well, he said, more to himself than to me. We're lucky to have her. I said nothing. I let the words soak in like water through drywall, slow, silent, and damaging. I took a sip, my hands steady even as my stomach flipped. I was not surprised anymore, just tired. Later that afternoon, I ran into Mrs. Brody outside the local hardware store. She was all smiles, wrapped in a floral windbreaker and holding a basket of organic lemons she insisted only sprouted when you love the tree back. You must be so proud of your sister, she said, pulling her cart to a stop. Helping your folks with the mortgage like that, a rare kind of daughter. I froze, smiling just wide enough to keep the crack from showing. Yes, I replied flatly. She's definitely something. I held the door for her, then stepped inside, blinking too fast under the flickering fluorescent light. My throat burned in that familiar way when injustice doesn't quite have space to roar, so it settles into your chest and squeezes. That evening, dinner was meatloaf and mashed potatoes, like it had been most Mondays since I was a kid. Except this time, the air was thicker, harder to chew. I pushed my food around and finally said, Someone mentioned today that Callista's been paying the mortgage. Vera didn't look up from her plate. Oh, that. It's just a misunderstanding. No one's trying to take anything away from you. Let's not make this dramatic. Callista dabbed her lips with a napkin, her tone sugar-slick. Why are you always so defensive, Taryn? You twist everything into a confrontation. My fork paused mid-air. Defensive? I said softly. Maybe because I'm tired of being dismissed in the house I've kept standing. The table quieted for a second, just long enough for discomfort to settle in. Then Gideon cleared his throat and asked if anyone had seen the new weather report. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The next morning, a letter came in the mail. Another thank you note from a client. This one handwritten in blue ink on expensive stationery, filled with phrases like attention to detail and heart in every corner. Gideon opened it. He skimmed it, chuckled, and said, Guess all those little jobs of yours are appreciated after all. Little, I repeated under my breath, the words scraping something raw in me. I took the letter from his hand and walked out without another word. Later that day, I found Vera in the laundry room folding towels. Stop calling it little, I said, calm but unmistakably clear. My work is what's keeping the lights on around here. Vera sighed, still focused on the fabric in her hands. We just want you to find something more stable, something with benefits, something real. I leaned against the doorframe. Stability isn't a title, Mom, I said. It's making your own schedule. It's paying bills without faking it for a photo. It's not lying to the people who raised you just to look like a success. She opened her mouth but said nothing. That night, I sat on the couch with a bowl of soup, scrolling through my bank statements. 2 months ago, there had been a $500 transfer to Vera's account. She'd told me it was for emergency meds Gideon needed after his fall. I hadn't questioned it. I never did. But later, as I passed by the hallway, I heard her on the phone, her voice just soft enough to pretend privacy. I gave it to Callista, she said. She just needed a little help. She was between paychecks and didn't want to overdraft again. I stood in the dark for a long minute, holding my breath like it would hold back the pain. I was the emergency, I whispered. She just didn't see it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I walked out to my truck around midnight. The air was thick with the smell of early summer, wet grass, motor oil, and resentment. I opened the glove compartment and pulled out the small fireproof safe I kept beneath the seat. Inside was my binder. Thick, clean, organized. Receipts, 24 months. Every mortgage payment, every renovation invoice, every note, every shred of proof that I had been the one holding it all up while they built statues for someone else. They wanted numbers? I muttered, stepping back into the garage. I'll give them facts. By midnight, the house had gone quiet, except for the occasional creak of the old floorboards and the hum of the refrigerator leaking into the hall. I was in the workshop, lights low, binder open. Receipts. 24 months. Stared back at me, its black plastic cover slightly curled from years of use. Inside, everything was filed by date, transaction, and impact. Each mortgage payment labeled, printed, and punched into place, like the chapters of a life no one else had bothered to read. Stability? They wanted stability? I had spreadsheets more stable than Callista's resume, and bank transfers more consistent than Vera's love. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen like I did every day. Vera was already there, drying a pan. Gideon sat with the paper, flipping to the finance section, not really reading it, just moving through the ritual of acting engaged. You know, he said, clearing his throat, your mom and I have been talking, and maybe it's time you looked into finding your own place. Vera chimed in, not even looking up. Not that we're pushing you out, but you're 30 now, Taryn. Most women your age are paying rent or planning next steps. Maybe it's time you moved forward? I didn't respond right away. I took a sip of my coffee, eyes locked on the steam swirling out of the mug like a warning. Forward, I repeated. As in, out? Neither of them corrected me. I nodded, placing my mug down gently. Okay, I said calmly. You want that? Fine. That evening, I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't beg. I slid an envelope under Vera's door. Inside was a breakdown of every mortgage payment I'd made for the past 2 years. $1,150. Every month, on time, without fail. Highlighted and itemized. At the top of the stack, I wrote by hand. For 2 years, I've paid you $750 a month so you could keep this house. Consider this my rent, retroactively. I went to bed early. No one knocked. The following afternoon, a ping from my phone broke the rhythm of sanding cabinet doors. A credit alert. Unfamiliar address. New rental application. My name. I froze. My stomach dropped before I even read the details. Then I put it together. Callista. She'd used my credit. Again. She was trying to get into a high-rise complex downtown, a luxury building she could never afford alone. I found her in the driveway later that evening, leaning against her car like it had just appeared there on the strength of her ambition. You used my name, I said plainly. She blinked. What are you talking about? The apartment on West Grand. You applied with my social, my financials. She scoffed. Oh, come on. I just needed to qualify. It's not like it's hurting you. I stepped closer. No, I said, voice steady. It's exposing you. She straightened, offended by the truth, as if her version of the world should have been enough for me to believe in. I walked back inside. At dinner, the air was tense, but Vera tried her usual icebreaker tactics. She served the salad with a forced smile. So, she said, placing the bowl on the table, what's new with your little projects? I looked at her, fork untouched, appetite gone. They're not little, I said, and they're not yours to take credit for anymore. The words didn't echo, they landed. Gideon paused, hand in midair, holding a dinner roll. Callista exhaled sharply through her nose. No one spoke. I didn't need them to. That night, just after 10, I was journaling when I heard a soft knock at my door. It creaked slightly open, but Vera didn't step in. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, voice thin. I didn't look up. I didn't answer right away. Then, with even breath, I said, You never asked. And for the first time, the silence felt like it belonged to me. The next morning, the kitchen felt colder than usual, though the thermostat hadn't budged. Vera moved around silently, buttering toast, eyes fixed anywhere but me. Gideon sipped his coffee, rustling the paper like it could drown out the tension. Callista's got a big meeting today, he offered casually. Some investor thing for that startup she's working with. I didn't even look up. Must be hard hosting tours when you've got nothing to show, I said, stirring my coffee slowly. No one responded. A few hours later, I was cleaning up the workshop, wiping down my miter saw, when my phone buzzed. A voice message from Lyle, Callista's boyfriend. It was clearly meant for her. You can't keep lying, Cal, his voice said, breathy and strained. You haven't worked in over a year. I can't keep covering for you. You post like everything's perfect, but it's falling apart. Taryn already knows. I can see it in her eyes. You're going to lose everyone if you keep this up. Click. I stood still, my hand resting on the edge of the workbench. That confirmation, clean and raw, hit me like a beam across the chest. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I knew. And now I had proof. From her own partner. My mind jumped back 2 weeks, to a missed call Vera had brushed off while we were loading groceries. The voicemail notification lit up her screen. She quickly deleted it. You should listen to that, I'd said. Just a telemarketer, she replied, tight-lipped. Except I'd caught a glimpse of the caller ID. Mid-State Mortgage Services. That message had mentioned Home Equity Support Fund, the alias I used to set up the monthly transfers. She knew, and chose silence. That afternoon, we all sat down for lunch, roast beef sandwiches and chips. I placed my phone face up on the table, screen glowing with the paused voice message. I didn't press play. Instead, I looked at Callista, her fingers perfectly manicured, nails tapping against her glass of iced tea. How's work going? I asked casually. Her smile twitched. Good, busy. I nodded. Still on track for that promotion? Vera glanced up sharply. Callista blinked once, slowly, then answered, Of course. I said nothing more, but the phone stayed there, face up, like a threat dressed as an accessory. Later that day, I was hauling lumber from my truck when I heard the back door creak open behind me. Callista walked toward me, arms crossed. You wouldn't, she said. I set the plank down and wiped my hands on my jeans. Wouldn't what? Use that message. You wouldn't humiliate me like that. No, I replied. You already did that. I'm just catching up. She stepped closer. If Mom and Dad find out? They already did, I cut in. They just chose not to see it, just like they always do. She blinked, unsure how to respond. I didn't wait for her to find the words. That evening, Vera hosted one of her family dinners. A few aunts, an old neighbor couple, Lyle. though his presence felt more obligatory than affectionate. The table was set like we were entertaining royalty, everything in its place, except honesty. As we reached dessert, Callista stood up with her wineglass in hand. "I just want to say how grateful I am," she began, "to our family, for the support, the trust, and most of all, for believing in each other. That's what this house is built on: love and honesty." The applause was awkward. I stood up slowly. "Some of us support," I said, my voice clear and measured. "Some of us lie, and some of us pay for both." Silence. Chairs creaked, forks froze midair. Vera's eyes widened, but she didn't speak. Gideon looked like he wanted to disappear into his dinner plate. I didn't need them to clap. I needed them to stop pretending I didn't exist. So I turned and walked out, the sound of my footsteps the only applause I'd ever need in that house. The sun was stubborn that Sunday afternoon, too warm for October, too bright for what was about to happen inside the house. Vera had gone all out for the family appreciation brunch, her words, not mine. The table was covered in lace I hadn't seen since the last funeral reception. She had even pulled out the champagne flutes, though no one ever drank champagne around here unless Callista brought it. I arrived on time, as always, dressed in jeans and a plain navy blouse. No need to put on a show. Callista was already there, of course, in something soft and expensive-looking, greeting each cousin and extended family member like she was hosting a charity gala instead of standing on the ashes of a lie. The moment I stepped inside, I knew this wasn't just brunch. It was theater. She kissed Vera's cheek and held court in the living room, laughing with our Aunt Denise from Omaha like they'd always been close. Lyle stood off to the side, checking his phone with the intensity of someone desperate to look busy. He caught my eye once, quick and apologetic. I didn't return the look. I headed to the kitchen to grab coffee and caught Vera staring at her iPad, frozen mid-scroll. Her lips moved silently as she read, brows creased. Then her eyes found me across the counter. She turned the screen around and showed me the email from Mid-State Mortgage Services. Subject: Account confirmation. Home Equity Support Fund. Thank you for your continued payments, Ms. Fields. Your account remains in good standing for 24 consecutive months. That was it. No argument, no denial, just silence. I nodded once. Vera looked like she might say something, but didn't. We returned to our respective corners of the stage. An hour into brunch, Callista clinked her glass. "If I could have everyone's attention," she said, voice syrup sweet, "I just want to say how lucky we all are to be in a family that supports each other. This house, this legacy, it's built on love, trust, and effort. I'm proud to give back to the people who gave me everything." Applause broke out. Real, enthusiastic applause. Vera clapped slowly. Her eyes never left her wineglass. I didn't move. As the plates were being cleared, I excused myself to the kitchen. I retrieved the manila folder from my bag and placed it on the kitchen island. Calm, deliberate, in full view of anyone lingering nearby. Inside, 24 months of payment records, highlighted statements, dates, account transfers, all stamped with my company's name. On top, a note in my handwriting. Truth isn't confrontational. It's just inconvenient when you're not ready for it. No one noticed at first. Then Aunt Denise picked it up, squinting at the papers. Her mouth opened, then closed. "Taryn," Vera said from across the room, voice low, unsure. "What is this?" I turned. "Receipts. I figured someone around here might want something tangible." The air went still. Callista stood from the table, her face draining of color. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. Lyle muttered, "Jesus!" under his breath and followed her out. An aunt I hadn't spoken to in years leaned toward Vera and whispered, not as softly as she probably meant to, "I thought Jess was the one helping them." There it was. Jess. The name Callista had borrowed online for years because it sounded more professional, more marketable. I watched as Vera stared at the folder like it was a burning bush. Then I walked past her. "You don't have to explain anything," I said. "I already learned everything I needed." I opened the back door, the handle warm from sunlight, and stepped into the yard, leaving the clatter of exposed truth behind me. By nightfall, I was parked outside a rental complex on the other side of town. Not far, but far enough. The lights from a nearby gas station buzzed overhead as I leaned back in the truck seat, engine off, world quiet. My phone buzzed. It was Lyle. "She's gone. They know. I'm sorry." I stared at the message for a long moment before closing my eyes and whispered to no one but myself, "Now they see her. And maybe, finally, they'll see me too." The rain started sometime around 4 a.m., just as the sky began trading black for gray. I sat in the driver's seat of my truck outside the rental complex I had toured weeks ago, arms folded, legs stiff, breath fogging the window. I hadn't meant to fall asleep there, but I also hadn't wanted to go anywhere else. The silence around me didn't feel like peace. It felt like debris settling after collapse. I didn't turn the engine on, just sat, listening, thinking. And then my phone buzzed. It was Vera. "We didn't mean to hurt you. You're strong. You don't need validation like Jess does." Jess. They were still calling her that. Minutes later, another ping. Voicemail, from Callista. "It was never about taking from you," she said, her voice trembling in that performative way she always summoned when caught. "I just needed to be seen." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then pressed delete. "So did I," I whispered, but no one ever hit play on me. When I got back to the house later that morning, the kitchen was quiet. Too quiet. Gideon sat by the window, cup of coffee untouched, his eyes scanning nothing. He nodded as I walked past him, but didn't speak. Vera was folding laundry on the couch. She looked up as I passed through the hallway. "You still angry?" she asked. I paused, then turned toward her. "No," I said. "I'm done." That landed heavier than yelling ever could. Because I meant it. They didn't ask what that meant. I doubt they truly heard it. Back in my room, I dropped my bag onto the bed and opened my banking app to cancel the auto payment. But there was a notification waiting. The last transaction had already processed. And there it was. The final mortgage payment from me to them. I stared at the confirmation email, fingers hovering above the screen. 2 months ago, Vera had asked me for $500. She claimed it was for Gideon's knee meds, said insurance wouldn't cover it. I wired it immediately. And now I remembered. Callista's post from the same week. She was all smiles, posing in front of a luxury apartment with the caption, "Couldn't have pulled off this move without a little help. Sometimes it just takes family." Family. I turned my phone off. The room felt smaller now, even though nothing had changed. I looked around. The bookshelf I built, the dresser I refinished, the patch of wall I painted when Vera said the color made her anxious. Everything in that room had my fingerprints on it, but none of it felt like mine anymore. When your sanctuary becomes a stage, it's time to leave the performance. So I started packing. I took only what mattered. My tools, my files, a few clothes, the binder. Everything else. Every decorative pillow, every forgotten gift, every piece of furniture I'd repaired but didn't own, stayed. I walked slowly down the hall, past the kitchen, where Vera stood folding the same towel for the third time. I placed a sealed envelope on her desk. The front read, "Mortgage, final month." She didn't reach for it. I didn't wait. With one suitcase in hand and the binder tucked beneath my arm, I opened the front door and stepped outside. The wind was cool, refreshing. The house stood behind me, still upright, still painted, still insulated. It had stood because I stayed. Let's see how it stands without me. The morning light hit differently through the tiny window of my new place. Softer, like it wasn't trying so hard to impress anyone, just showing up, quiet and steady. I stood in the middle of my modest living room, Bare walls, boxes still stacked, and for the first time in years, my lungs expanded all the way. It wasn't big, but every inch of it was mine. And it was enough. The garage out back was small, but clean, the kind of space where work could happen without someone claiming it was their idea later. I set my toolbox down and opened the side door. The smell of sawdust and potential met me at the threshold. It was the sound of my phone vibrating on the countertop that broke the moment. A text from a friend I hadn't heard from in weeks. "Saw your sister at the library event. You've got to see this." She attached a photo. My chest tightened before I even opened it. There it was, a poster display for the local library's Hometown Pride campaign. And front and center, in full color, stood Callista, smiling like she'd never known a single consequence. The text read, "Successful alumna, marketing executive, and loving daughter who helped her parents save their family home." I stared at it for what felt like forever. Then I laughed. Not from humor, more like disbelief that somehow, even now, they were still trying to rewrite the ending. I didn't throw the phone, didn't scream, just exhaled, long and steady. Then I walked over to my desk, opened my laptop, and uploaded a file. It was a clean PDF of the mortgage records I'd kept, each page stamped and dated, titled clearly, "Home Equity Support Fund. 24 months." I posted it on my business blog under a new page titled, "What They Didn't See." No drama, no names, just truth. Underneath I wrote, "Sometimes the most silent builder leaves the strongest foundation." I hit publish and closed the laptop. By noon, my phone started buzzing again. Only this time, it wasn't about someone else's lie. A client forwarded the blog on social media with a caption, "Not all heroes wear branding. Some just pay the bills." Another comment said, "We need more builders, fewer posers." I received 3 new project inquiries in 24 hours. That night, I attended a networking dinner hosted by a local home design association. One of the older contractors, someone I'd done a joint job with 2 years back, mentioned seeing the library display. "Didn't your sister do that big kitchen renovation over on Walnut?" he asked between bites of steak. I took a breath, then answered, "No, I did." Quietly, while being erased loudly. He looked at me for a beat, then nodded. "Well, it was damn good work." The recognition didn't feel like a trophy. It felt like oxygen. The next morning, I found a plain envelope in my mailbox. No postage. Hand-delivered. Return address. Vera. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Some letters don't need to be read, just known. The morning sunlight in my apartment always felt gentle, like it had learned to knock before entering. I walked into the kitchen barefoot, the tile cold underfoot, and spotted it. An envelope on the counter. White, no stamp, hand-delivered. Vera's handwriting. I stood there, staring at it for a long minute before finally tearing it open. "We didn't see things clearly. Your sister is going through so much. We've always loved you. We just didn't know how to show it." I stopped reading after that, folded the letter neatly, placed it face down next to the coffee pot. I didn't cry. I didn't feel vindicated either. Mostly, I felt tired. Not the kind that sleep fixes, the kind that settles in your bones when something you held on to finally breaks off and floats away. A week earlier, while dropping off some old supplies to a local thrift drive, I caught a glimpse of something familiar in the donation pile near the garage. An expensive leather tote. Dark brown, gold trim. Tag still hanging from the handle. I had bought it for Vera's birthday 6 months ago. Special ordered it. Had her initials embossed. And there it was. Tucked between a worn-out juicer and a plastic bin of tangled chargers. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. Some things, when discarded, don't make a sound. But they echo for a long time. That night, I changed my phone number, removed Vera and Gideon from my emergency contacts, deleted the shared calendar that once synced their doctor's appointments to my phone. Then I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Legacy. My way. I started fresh. No more chasing approval. No more waiting for applause in a room that never planned to clap. A few days later, a second letter arrived. This one was different. Shakier handwriting, the pen pressing harder into the paper. Gideon. I know I wasn't brave, but you were. I'm proud of the woman you are. That line stopped me. I read it again. Then again. And then, finally, I cried. Not because I wanted him back, but because, for once, I didn't need him to say it. But he did anyway. The following afternoon, I visited the new project site, a women's shelter that had commissioned me to design and build an empowerment center. A place for workshops, crafts, small business coaching. They wanted clean lines, open space, warmth without pretense. The rooms were empty when I arrived, but I could already hear the future in them. Voices, laughter, second chances. I walked the perimeter slowly, imagining shelves full of books, stools made for shared stories, tables built for more than dinner. This time, I was building where I was wanted. As I stepped outside, a notification buzzed on my phone. A message from a nonprofit I had pitched 2 months ago. They wanted to partner on a long-term project. Full creative control, fair pay, a chance to leave something that lasted. I leaned against my truck, sun warming my face, and smiled. Turns out, when you stop asking to be seen, you start making things worth looking at. 2 weeks passed, like a slow breath finally let go. The blog post had spread beyond anything I imagined. The silent daughter who paid the price. That's what the headline read in the local paper. A journalist from the Tribune had picked it up after it was shared by one of my clients on LinkedIn. I hadn't written it for attention. I wrote it to unburden the truth. Still, the aftermath was swift. My inbox filled with messages. Some from strangers, some from clients I hadn't heard from in years. People thanked me for my candor. Some told me their own stories of being overlooked, replaced, erased. And then there were the others. The ones who just quietly asked, "How did you keep going?" Callista's illusion didn't stand a chance. A viral thread followed. One internet sleuth after another pulled up inconsistencies in her social media claims. Reused stock photos, conference badges that didn't match real events, a LinkedIn profile that hadn't been updated since 2019. Comments flooded in. Where's the actual job title? All flash, no foundation. The real success story is her sister. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Even Vera tried to intervene online, replying to a few comments under an alias, trying to redirect the narrative. But the tide had already turned. One afternoon, as I was checking measurements on a new shelving unit, Callista showed up at the job site. Her hair was pulled back, makeup barely there. She looked smaller somehow, like her spine had finally learned how to bend. "You humiliated me," she said, eyes already glossy. I didn't stop working. "No. You did that when you wore my sweat like a crown." She looked away, voice cracking. "Can you take it down?" I finally met her eyes. "Let the truth breathe. You've had the stage long enough." She turned and left without another word. That weekend, Vera invited me to dinner. No guests, just her and Gideon. I almost didn't go. But curiosity is a funny thing. It pulls even when you've already let go. The house smelled the same. Chicken roasting, candles lit, everything just as polished as always. But something had shifted in the air, like even the walls had learned how to be quieter. We ate in near silence. No grand speeches, no forced small talk. Gideon finally cleared his throat and said, "Thank you." 2 words. I nodded. Vera got up after dessert and walked to the mantel. She picked up a new framed photo and placed it carefully in the center. It was from a week ago, a candid shot. Me standing in front of the women's shelter project, smiling, genuinely. Callista wasn't in it. I stared at the photo for a moment, then walked over and gently turned it face down. "This doesn't undo anything," I said, my voice even, "but I'll accept the gesture." The next morning, I stood on a stage at a local women's business panel. The room was filled with builders, designers, founders, some young, some retired, all with hands that had made things last. When it was my turn, I stepped up to the mic and told my story, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I used to wait for someone to say I mattered, I said. Then I learned. Don't wait for someone to give you your worth. Write it in invoices, live it in receipts, measure it in the things that stand because you refuse to fall. They stood. Every single person in that room stood and clapped. Weeks later, I drove by the old house. The grass was overgrown, windows dusty, and taped to the front door was a foreclosure notice. Bold, unforgiving. I didn't get out of the truck, just sat there, watching. That house crumbled, I whispered, and somehow I stood straighter than ever. Back at my shop, I signed the lease paperwork on my first commercial showroom. Brick exterior, natural light, space for clients, space for creation. On the wall, just inside the entrance, I hung a plaque. Success isn't a title. It's what you survive and build anyway. I stepped back, looked around the space that was finally mine. This time, my name's on everything, and no one's erasing it.